Coming up on Windows Weekly, I am Micah Sargent subbing in for Leo Laporte this week, and we've got a great show. First, we talk about tiny11 2311. It's a smaller install of Windows 11, and what does that entail? And should you install the entire thing or pick and choose? It's a great conversation. Then we talk about Windows Inside. Yes, let's take a look at the dev channel first and foremost. Paul says that Android devices are now available in nearby sharing, and sharing files between an Android device and a Windows PC is actually a little bit faster. In the Canary build, we can see a new energy saver feature, and Paul is pretty sure this is a hint at Windows 12. Richard Campbell, on the other hand, isn't so sure. After that, we talk about how Amazon announces its AI chatbot for the enterprise, which leaves us wondering, what exactly is an Amazon enterprise customer? And checking in on Paul's Call of Duty habit. Spoiler alert, he's still not really playing the game. All that and more coming up on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly with Richard Campbell, Paul Thurrott, and this week Micah Sargent, episode 857, recorded Wednesday, November 29th, 2023. SharePoint, all the way down. This episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by our friends at IT Pro TV, now called ACI Learning. Keep your IT team's skills up with the speed of technology. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit. Twit listeners can receive up to 65% off an IT Pro Enterprise Solution Plan after completing their form. Based on your team's size, you'll receive a properly quoted discount tailored to your needs. And by Traceroute, the podcast for digital pioneers. Traceroute offers a fascinating glimpse into the inner workings of our digital world. Get keyed into the conversation today. Listen and subscribe to the new season of Traceroute on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out Traceroute now. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show where every week we take a deep dive into all things Microsoft with the absolute experts, Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. I am Micah Sargent, subbing in for Leo Laporte this week as he finds himself and reclaims new life, happiness, and perhaps his heart will grow 3 sizes, not because of the food he's eating, but because he will be changed. So upon his return, who knows what Leo Laporte you might get. Until then, you've got me, Micah Sargent, and I am joined by your 2 steadfast and true pals. To my left, I have to look actually to see, is Richard Campbell, who is joining us.
So I would look this way?
Yes. There you go. Yeah. From
nice.
what was it? Madtown? What was it again?
We call it Mad Park, but it's Madeira Park. Yeah.
Mad Park. That's right. The Mad Park. How are you?
I'm good. Excellent. You know, it's good to be home. Next week will be in Orlando, last trip of the year. So
nice.
I had a couple of weeks at home.
All right. And to my right, joining us from Lower Macungie, is Paul Thurrott. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Micah.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. Is the move done now? Or are you still in process?
Moving is never done, as you know.
This is true.
But we are, we're in here like ticks now. So
you got some cool artwork behind you. Have you ever talked about that?
Yeah, that's going to eventually get hung up on the wall. So
super vintage. Yeah.
Very vintage.
Love the
July
Byte
1997 Byte magazine cover featuring a train.
Oh,
So
nice.
it's a little bit of everything I love in one picture.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you were a train guy.
Oh, yes.
We've got a lot of train guys on the network. Dick DiBartolo falls asleep every night to train videos.
To train sets.
Yeah.
Trains. So we used to live right next to the train tracks in Macungie, and then we moved here, and one of my concerns was I'm never going to hear this again, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't hear it as well because we're not close to it, but 3 o'clock in the morning the other night, there was some crazy big train thing going through, and you could hear it. And in the middle of the dark, at 3 o'clock, I was like, "Thank you." And I was like,
"Oh,
nice."
I'm glad
she heard it too. You know?
Yeah, I'm glad that you got to have some trains. Well, I don't have a segue that works for trains. I guess we're going down the tracks to move into talking about Windows. Terrible. Yeah, let's keep it on the rails. There we go. Thank you, Kevin. As we talk about tiny11, what's that all about?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard of this project. There was a tiny11 project as well. And, thank you, sir. Might I have another? This is a project. I don't know the person's name. It's NT He's on Twitter and he's on the Internet Archive and, whatever. But he's taking the Windows 11 installer and trying to strip it down to something much smaller. And he just released the latest version. He's kind of renaming it so that it's clear which version it is. He's calling it 2311, 23H2, which might have been a little clearer, but that's okay. So it lines up with the 23H2 release, obviously. It's 20% smaller than the original image he did for 23H2 a couple months ago, and is significantly smaller than the Microsoft version, right? So 3.5 gigabytes for the ISO file versus about 6.2, I think it is for the normal Windows 11 ISO. So the big change, and the reason I'm discussing it now, is he actually got servicing to work. And what that means is you can install this thing on a computer and just get Windows updates normally, where just before you had to kind of manually download those things. So that's a big step. And why would you do this? The primary purpose of it is to allow Windows 11 to run on lower end hardware, specifically hardware that isn't qualified, to run Windows 11. But honestly, I think there's a side benefit to it as well, which is that you get a lot less of the crap.
Right.
Right. So always the question is, how much are you adding back in again? Like, obviously, Edge is uninstalled. So
Edge is uninstalled. That's true. So you can install it if you want to. Of course, that's all in flux right now anyway, right? We know that Microsoft Edge will be uninstallable in the EEA soon, but you can use WinGet to install anything, basically. The Xbox components aren't installed by default, was one of the things he called out. But if you install any game from the store that uses Xbox, that stuff will be enabled and it will work normally.
Nice.
So this one, I feel like it's crossed a threshold where it's starting to be viable. I wouldn't say for mainstream / normal people, but for technical people.
Yeah, no, this then becomes your logical starting point then, right? This is, instead of having a Swiss Army knife with all the blades already in it, it's like, just give me a couple and I'll get the others that I need.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, from a security perspective, is there concern about using an installer from a third party?
Yeah, there is. We don't know who this person is, and we shouldn't trust him. But people do. And again, this has been around for a while. I mean, there was a tiny11, like I said, and I looked at tiny11 back in, I don't know, February, March, earlier this year, and interesting, but not quite what I was looking for. I think with the serviceability functionality that is there now, it becomes a lot more interesting. Look, it's not, I've written and talked a lot about WinGet, which is the Windows package manager. It's a command line tool, but it's not super hard to use. So if you need a couple of things that aren't in that base install, you should be able to get up to speed. So I'm testing this now. I want to see if this is viable.
See if it makes a good workflow going forward. Because the real question is, what are you installing by default in a regular install that you never use?
That's right. Yeah. And I don't know how other people do things, but for phones and computers with me, I will do a clean install. And there's a couple of things that I know I need, right? So I install that stuff. And then the rest of that computer's life cycle is me occasionally saying, oh, Red, I need this. Oh, Red, I need this. And so you kind of install as you go. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of following that path here just to see how it works. And we'll see. It just happened this week. I need a bit more time with it. I don't want to give a glowing endorsement quite yet, but this is interesting, and I can't remember exactly what Richard said earlier, but it reminded me of Visual Studio Code, where you start with this really stripped down thing, and you can just add the components you want. And that's one of the things I really like about Visual Studio Code. In fact, I think that's a viable model for web browsers and for lots of different kinds of software. In this sense, this is treating Windows in that same way. Give you the most stripped down version of the OS possible, and then allow you, the user, to decide what gets installed, not just take everything.
It just begs the question, why doesn't Microsoft do this?
So Microsoft, their strategy, which is probably not unique in the platform OS space, I guess, is that things work better together. And if you have everything there, you can ensure that it always works. And there's this baseline of functionality. And a lot of the bad behaviors in Windows 11, it's not always for bad behaviors, but a lot of the bad behaviors in Windows 11 are tied to this kind of way of doing things, which is we're going to ignore your browser choice because we are going to load Edge, which you've said you don't want, so that we can go to some MSN website, which is terrible and serves ads and whatever. And we want to make sure you get that full experience because it benefits Microsoft, right? In that case. I guess there are other examples.
There's a subtext that you're getting at there, which is that there are employees inside of Microsoft who are scorecarded based on the number of installs of their particular tool.
I was going to ask that.
I don't care what you want. I care about what I get.
Hey, that thing that I made needs to make it into the system, right?
Yeah, because that's where my bonus lives.
So just to be fair, I will say there are instances where this does benefit people. So for example, not the Microsoft Edge stuff, that doesn't benefit anybody, but you have a set of applications like the snipping tool and Paint and Clipchamp that are standalone apps, but they also kind of work together. So if one of those things is not on the system and you have created a video clip of like a screen recording and you want to edit it, it's just a seamless kind of integration by default. If Clipchamp wasn't installed on that computer, you would just get I don't know what you would get actually, because I've never tried it, but I assume what you'd get is a Microsoft Store installer request, and then you could go from there. But just having it all there.
Yeah,
the theory is, look, we have infinite PC resources,
I think it's good for, as you said, the normal user, because think about if you are out and about and you pull out that laptop and you try to do one of these, and then you're not anywhere near an internet connection, and suddenly you can't use this tool that you expected to be able to use. So, I understand wanting to have as much of it available as possible. This is true
of data as well, right? I've complained a lot about Microsoft's behaviors with regard to OneDrive and forcing people to use folder backup and so forth. But I've also been on a plane, double-clicked on a file, and it doesn't load because I don't have it synced locally, and no, I can't do the thing I was going to do.
Can we go back to that part where I didn't have an internet connection? Because I don't want to live in that world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, dear.
I think of it as takeoff and landing.
Yeah, those are the only times I'm disconnected. Oh, man. Well, yeah, I mean, I like the idea for folks who are particular about their systems, and maybe ultimately, it reminds me of, it's a little bit like when you go through a traumatic experience and
that was not what I thought you were going to say, but go on.
to reclaim control in your life, you decide to do something wild. Oftentimes that results in someone like bleaching their hair blonde or shaving their head. I don't know why it's a lot of hair things, but, or buying a new car when you go through your midlife crisis. And so with this, it's like, I feel like I need to have the absolute control over this system. So I'm going to install this not thin client, that's a different term, but I'm going to install this very tiny thing and build everything up from there, because then I don't have to worry about them. It's a lot of management, right?
Well, that's the question in a way, right? Is it a lot of management? I mean, that's what I'm trying to kind of figure out. So in the old days, and I mean like the 1990s old days, if you installed something like Windows 98 or Windows 2000 was like this, Windows setup would bring up these dialog boxes that would have a list of applications, little check boxes, and kind of through and say, yeah. And sometimes, there'd be submenus and all that. So there are these two extremes of you get to pick everything up front, and it's really tedious and it takes a long time and you don't know what you're doing. So you're not really even sure what to pick, or Microsoft just installs everything for you and you don't really think about it or worry about it. And my argument, I think probably always has been, we should just have that choice. There will be people who will just click through and say, yep, give me everything. And there will be people who say, no, I actually do want to go in and pick what I want. So I don't know, Windows today, honestly, it's not engineered a little differently, but it's just that what the UI that it presents doesn't give you these choices. I think it depends on the apps and the services. There are certain things you could be really silly and go into, startup apps and Task Manager, or actually in the Settings app or whatever, and turn things off that you need. You reboot your computer and now you don't have sound. And you think something's wrong, and what's wrong is you, because you turned off the Realtek thing or whatever the heck it was in the startup group. So it's a weird world we're in, because it's not like configuring like a CD player for a car. It's like configuring something in the engine for a car. Some people do know what that stuff is, but a lot of people don't.
I pulled this fuse and now suddenly my car's making a strange sound.
Yeah. What's wrong with my car? Why is it my car's fault?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So yeah, I guess install tiny11 at your own peril.
Yes. Yeah. And right. And not to be dramatic about it, but I mean, yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting. I think this is, I like this kind of effort. I talked about a tip probably a couple months ago where using the normal Windows 11 installer, the Windows setup program, you can turn off a lot of the promotional stuff and not have a bunch of crapware installed. You come up with a really clean start menu. That's another approach. It's kind of in the middle. The start menu is clean, but you still have everything's still installed, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like it didn't cut anything off other than the crap, the Spotify. What else is in the start menu by default? I don't even know anymore. I cleaned mine up, but all that's, that junk that's kind of just there. LinkedIn is one of them. PC makers put their own stuff on there, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's different ways, there's different things you can do. This is on the more extreme side, I guess, but again, it's actually gotten interesting. Back in February, I wouldn't have recommended this to anybody, but today it's like, yeah, if you're listening to the show, I mean, you might want to look at this.
All right. I think it's time to talk about Windows Insider. We got some updates in the different channels, yeah?
Yeah, so every week we talk about what Microsoft has done in the previous week, or in the week since the show, or whatever, the 6 days or whatever it's been. And there's been 3 builds to the Insider program since our last show, 2 of which landed today, pretty soon, right before the show. But last week there was a beta channel build that includes some changes we're starting to see in these builds that came out today as well. So there's a share feature that's been built into Windows since Windows 8. In Windows 11, is that true? No, probably Windows 10. They added something called nearby share, for example. In Windows 11 now, they're adding the ability to share content through Microsoft Teams using the share panel, I'll call it. It's only available to those who sign in with an Entra ID, which is what used to be Azure Active Directory or a Microsoft Worker School account. But that's kind of an interesting integrated bit. For those people, Windows 11 23H2 has a feature that's kind of loose. I don't think the official name is this, but it's called Ink Anywhere. And this is the ability to basically any control that you can select, you could just start writing in and it will work in place, which is kind of cool. This build adds that ability to a number of new languages, including Canadian English, Richard, which I didn't know was.
Well, thank goodness for that, because we don't have enough. You don't have enough U's in your version. So
yeah, exactly. And that's most of it. I mean, there's some other little fit and finish type things, process grouping and task managers, a little prettier or whatever. Not a big deal, but this is like this is kind of this rolling effect of change that we're starting to see. So, for example, in the dev build that came out today, that share feature is in that as well. The Ink Anywhere feature with additional languages in there. Last week, we talked about some Copilot changes where you can move Copilot to different parts of the screen. And if you have multiple screens, it will remember what screen it was on, which is kind of neat. So that's rolling out to more people. But there are actually 2 new and unique features in this build that I think are quite interesting. One of them is that the Copilot icon, which is that kind of colorful looking squiggle thing, is moving to the far right of the taskbar over by the what used to be called, I almost called it arrow peak, the show desktop little sliver there in the corner, which makes it a little bit more like, I don't know, the Longhorn sidebar in a way, right? Because it's kind of in place with where that thing will pop up right on the right edge of the screen by default. So that's interesting. And there's a new feature for nearby sharing, which adds Android devices to the list, right? Ooh. So I keep talking about this like that. I confuse the names, but I think on Android it's called Nearby Share. This is a native
built-in Google. I got my Android device right here.
You can look it up. So I think it's called Nearby Share. Actually, why do I think? Why don't I just look it up? I'm sorry. It's actually called Nearby Share in Windows. Excuse me. I think it might be called Nearby Sharing in Android. So Nearby Share in Windows is its own thing.
Yep,
Google
Nearby
has
Share.
Yeah, Nearby Share. So Google released an app called Nearby Share for Windows, so you can share between an Android device and Windows. And at the time, I was like, guys, there's already a Nearby Share interface in Windows. Why wouldn't you just integrate it into that? Well, Microsoft's doing it now. So in this dev build, there is the ability to share to available Android devices as well. I if I could poll every Windows user on earth, I bet I am one of 3 people that uses this feature. I use it every single day. I love it. It just got a lot faster, by the way.
Nice.
But Nearby Share is exactly what it sounds like. You bring up a list of the computers that have this feature enabled and allows you to send files arbitrarily over to that computer. And I use it primarily for the book. When I'm taking screenshots, I have a computer for that, and I want to bring them over to the computer where I'm going to edit them and then put them into the folder where they belong. And Nearby Share is the way I do that. It's fantastic. So being able to do it with your Android device is pretty cool. So that's good. And finally, sorry.
Go ahead.
There's a Canary build today, which also has a new feature. Now, remember that Canary is this part of the Insider program. We keep thinking maybe someday it's going to have some Windows 12 stuff. I could be wrong, but this seems like it's the first kind of major new feature to debut in the Canary channel since they announced it earlier this year. But it is something called Energy Saver, which is an extension to Battery Saver, which is a program or a system that's existed in Windows for quite a while. I hope they don't keep them both there in there side by side. But Energy Saver is what it sounds like. It's a more efficient way to save the battery when power's running low, right? So you could actually just turn this on and leave it on all the time. You could just have it come on at a certain percentage, which is what Battery Saver does today. It's not 100% clear why it's different or how it's different. It might have something to do with the new processors we have now in PCs and their new methods for switching between efficiency and performant modes, right? And the other thing that comes to mind here is this came up. It might have been early this year, February, March, sometime in that time frame. HP and AMD worked together on a system to handle power management outside of the Windows power management because the processor just couldn't, the system couldn't handle how the processor worked. And they told me at the time that Microsoft was going to adapt Windows so that it could better handle this type of processor. And I wonder if this isn't the first step toward this kind of a system where it runs at a really idle state most of the time, but when you need to do something, you click on a menu, you run something in Excel, you edit an image, enough of the processor cores fire up just for that action, and then they kind of die back down. And it's supposed to provide this, it's not supposed to. I reviewed the laptop and it's fantastic. So it actually does work, right? So the idea here is that you get the performance you expect from a kind of a premium high-end laptop, but you also get really, really good battery life, which is, in the Intel world is a myth or a dream or whatever. So I'm curious now if this isn't the first step toward that thing that they were talking about almost a year ago. We will see.
You're the only one I think who thinks it's 12 at this point. I mean, I want to believe.
No, I'm going to die.
I want to believe. But it's a very Satya feature too. He's been big on green. So
yep.
The whole, an extended energy saving mode is cool.
So into green that when you go into Windows Update in the Settings app, there's a little picture of a leaf, and it says Windows Update is committed to helping reduce carbon emissions. And it's like seriously, that's great. That definitely advertise that in Windows, which is where that doesn't happen. But that's fine. It's okay.
Everything's fine.
And then lastly, here in the Windows section, a little conversation about
confusing.
Samsung.
So, Samsung has their own browser.
Why?
If you have a Samsung phone, you might have seen it. It's called Internet, because duh. Anyway. But apparently they have a Chromium-based desktop browser as well, version of this. I was not aware of this. And maybe it's brand new. Actually, I have no idea. But it showed up in the Microsoft Store of all places. It's a little curious when you first install it because the first screen is full of Korean characters and you think, okay, this maybe isn't for me. But then it goes full-blown English, at least in my case. It has built-in ad blocker. It's, modern enough looking. It looks like a lot of other Chromium browsers. The tabs have kind of color rings around them. I would never sign into my Samsung account on anything, but you could do that. And I guess if you do, that's probably how you sync your settings and so forth, and how Samsung will track your activities around the internet if you're into that kind of thing. I have no idea why this exists. Maybe that is why, so they can track your activities around the internet. I have no idea.
Almost certainly.
Yeah, it's a strange little. It's a strange thing. I don't know. They've not officially announced it, so I don't know.
Oh wow! So it's a soft launch?
It just appeared. Yeah.
The telemetry tells us that any Samsung user who has a Windows machine is always looking for the Samsung browser in the Windows Store.
I respect. No, that's too strong of a word. I get that some people are into Samsung and they buy Samsung things and they make high quality devices, and that's fine. Actually, their computers are really good, or very good anyway.
But to your point, it's an ecosystem you buy into as well.
Yeah, that's a weird choice to me. I feel like you go Apple or you go like full blown. You get Pixel and you just stick with that stuff.
Well, but if you're going Pixel because you're going bare metal Android, you're trying to say is,
so you'd use Google Chrome and
Yeah. But Samsung is its own dressed up version of Android, just like their browsers is dressed up version of Chromium. But it's like, do you like the Samsung decoration? And I know folks that do. Like, they buy the latest S series phone. Like, it's a space.
Is there bookmark same?
My wife is a Samsung user. She's lost to me forever. But I don't mind the One UI stuff. I don't have a problem with, honestly. I think it's attractive. The issue I have with Samsung is the 117 crapware apps that they install in there, 37 of which you cannot even uninstall. And I will say one of the downsides to their PC products are that they are actually the same way. And to get around this, I had a Galaxy Book Pro, probably, I think was the name of it, last year or 2 years ago. And I don't remember the exact item, but it was in the high double digits of superfluous Samsung apps. So I did a clean install using the downloadable ISO that Microsoft has, and half those apps still came back later. Like there's something about the machine that just triggers this automatic store install of a bunch of these apps. And to me, that's not, we just talked about tiny11. This is like the opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the crapware. Could I get more of the crapware? Is there a place to go? Yeah, Samsung.com. That's the place.
Now with extra crapware.
Yeah, exactly.
It's as I coined, the foie grasification of the system. Nice. I will die having made that into a verb, I swear. You foie gras it. Anyway,
that sounds like a compliment.
Well, it depends on who you are.
Yeah, right.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. It's great for everyone, but the duck.
You know what? The duck had a great life. It's just the last 10 seconds were terrible, but
then there was a moment.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Anyway, so Samsung got its browser, the Microsoft Store. Anything else you want to say about that before we take our first break, Paul?
No, this was a surprisingly light week for Windows. Although, to be fair, it was a holiday week, right?
And post Ignite, it's a double whammy,
right?
Yeah. It's been light all week trying to find different news stories to talk about. So I'm not surprised. But let's take a quick break so I can tell you about who's bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. It's our friends at IT Pro TV, now called ACI Learning. ACI Learning covers all of your audit, cybersecurity, and information technology training needs. You already know the name IT Pro TV from our network. Now a part of ACI Learning, IT Pro has expanded its capabilities, providing more support for IT teams. ACI keeps all its courses current, including Microsoft Cloud, AWS, CompTIA, and more. IT teams significantly benefit from IT Pro. ACI Learning kept all the fun and the personality of IT Pro TV, but they amplified it with their robust solutions for all your training needs. You can let your team be entertained while they train with short format content and more than 7,200 hours to choose from. The audience asked and ACI delivered just in time to wrap up your annual CPE. ACI is re-releasing its entire audit catalog in shorter, easier to digest versions. That means your CPE exams for each course will now be faster as well. You can check out the new audit courses and lab releases this month, including Certified Information Systems Auditor and CompTIA Security Plus. Get the full scoop on how how ACI can help you navigate the audit world by visiting acilearning.com/blog. Don't miss out on the upcoming audit webinar available to watch live or on demand. It's the All Things Cybersecurity with Bo Bullock on November 30th. IT Pro TV, which is now ACI Learning, keeps your business from risking redundancy via the most up-to-date certifications and courses available. It provides you with a personal account manager to make sure you aren't wasting anyone's time. Your account manager is going to work with you to ensure your team only focuses on the skills that matter to help your organization so that you can leave unnecessary training behind. It holds ISO certification, so you know you're receiving the world-class training your team deserves. Keep your IT team up with the speed of technology. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit. Twit listeners receive a free trial and up to 65% off an IT Pro Enterprise Solution plan. The discount is based on the size of your team when you fill out the form. That's go.acilearning.com/twit. And we thank ACI Learning for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. All right, folks, we are back from the break. I am Micah Sargent, subbing in for Leo Laporte this week on Windows Weekly, joined as always by the Windows crew, Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. And it's time to head into Microsoft 365 and AI. What's up there?
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, so one of the big stories that isn't Sam Altman with AI is that there's only a handful of companies on Earth that have the infrastructure to deliver these capabilities at scale. And of course, they're all kind of fighting with each other to, get ahead and so forth. Microsoft cracked it open this year. It's been really interesting. To their credit, they've actually come out with a bunch of products, so it's not just talk. And I think it's fair to say that, Amazon, Google, been caught a little flat-footed. So interesting. So it's been an interesting turnaround for Microsoft. But there's a report that Microsoft and Meta are on track to receive 3 times the number of Nvidia Tensor Core GPUs by the end of the year that Amazon, Google, and Oracle will get. And that's fascinating because that's the choke point right now, right? It's one thing to have the capacity, but if you don't have, it's one thing to have the capacity, you actually have to have these GPUs. We talked about Nvidia earnings last week, I think, and they had tripled year over year. Tripled is a number, or is a phrase, a word you don't hear a lot when you talk about earnings announcements. That is just that's not a thing. But it is for Nvidia. And the reason is they've just stumbled into this market because they were making GPUs that just happen to work really well for this use case. And it happens to be the most important use case on Earth. And so all these companies are scrambling to get as many as they can. We'll see how this works out in the real world. And I don't know the company that issued this report. I've never heard of Omdia, which the Register reported on it. But this is really, really interesting because it could be another bit of good news for Microsoft, right? It's kind of like Sony versus Microsoft in the console space in the post-pandemic world where no one could get components, and Sony, for whatever reason, had a much easier job getting components than Microsoft did. That made a big difference because you can't buy a console if it's not on the store shelf, and Sony was able to get more of them out there than Microsoft was.
I don't think the surprise here that Microsoft got the bulk because they've clearly put the shot in place with, hey, we're going to build our own hardware. And so if you're going to sell us stuff, you better do it right now. And the one that surprises me is Meta.
Yeah, I don't quite understand how that's the case. In Microsoft's case, I suppose it's a little bit like Apple and component makers where they'll go to some hardware company and say, look, we need 1 million or whatever it is of these things. Yeah. And they get the priority because they're Apple. And Microsoft may have just, listen, there was a reason the CEO of Nvidia was on stage with Satya Nadella for what felt like 3 hours a couple of weeks ago. They might have hooked up early on in this process, knowing that, Microsoft would need these things.
Yeah.
And said, look, we want to make sure we have a channel where we're getting this stuff.
And again, we get back to the weird part here is Meta. Like,
yes.
Why?
Yep.
Meta?
Can't explain Meta. Yep.
Yeah. That one gets me. Like, I totally understand why Microsoft.
The company that renamed itself after the thing we hate the most about it, or care the least about, maybe is the friendlier way to say that.
Well, and clearly, like, what I like is, admittedly, Horizon World hasn't done well, but he hasn't given up. The upside to Zuck having control of everything is that he's going to keep slugging away. There's nothing anybody can do about it. There will be no shareholder revolt. There is no way out. It is Zuck's vision, and that's all there is. Yeah. So why did he commit to 150,000 and get the deal early? Because where are the Meta AI product announcements? I'm like, or is this all going into Horizon World in some way?
Do you think? Do you think that's what it is? I mean,
I could see that because if the biggest, so they released this thing that lets you create these worlds, but people upon doing it realize that it takes as much time as, it takes a tenth of the time that it would take to actually build something, but it still takes a long time. That's a lot involved. If instead you could describe the world you wanted to create and then it goes and makes that for you, I could see that being something. And we still have yet to see a company truly nail it when it comes to generative 3D content. So if Meta wants to end up being the company that does that, that's where they could stand out. It's still at the forefront in terms of what I've seen out there. It all is really messy. You have to do a lot of work afterwards.
And Zuck was definitely on record saying, hey, the only way we're going to make these virtual worlds work is with AI technology. I'm just, that's a happy noise that a CEO makes. This is a big spend. Like, did anybody get the price on an H100? Like, how much money did they just drop here?
Well, I mean, they don't quite have infinite money, but they sort of do.
Pretty close.
What was that? Richie, do you remember the name? There was a company that was coming up with a generative AI kind of a world builder thing for game developers, right? Which kind of falls into this category a little bit.
I don't remember
this notion of, you basically are just creating things on the fly, right? It doesn't have to be the same sad environment every single time. It can generate something. Maybe that is what it is.
Apparently these are 30,000 a crack.
There you go.
Woof.
So it's 30,000 times 150,000.
A lot.
That's a couple of bucks. Is that $4.5 billion with a B?
You're better. It's your math than I am. Yeah, 4.5. Sorry.
4.5.
That's what it sounds like.
With a B.
Yep.
Yeesh.
Pretty soon you're talking about real money. That's two B-2 bombers.
Right.
Yeah, and the other part of it too, I'm thinking about there's for a long time been this ongoing conversation that the biggest problem with the Meta Quest market is that there aren't enough games out there.
I was going to say, is that there isn't one?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yes, it's that there isn't one. So
they have the network effect problem. Nobody will make a game for it because there's not enough headsets. There's not enough headsets because there's no game for it.
Yeah. What if Meta decides to be its own? I can't think of the guy's name now. Tim from not Tim Apple, but the other Tim that makes that makes the game, the systems that actually make games. I don't know why I can't think of his name. But
Tim Sweeney?
Is that his name?
No, from Epic?
Yeah, Epic Games. Thank you. What are there are like two major companies that make, I guess Epic doesn't quite apply. I'm thinking of a different one, but anyway, they are behind the software that make a lot of the games that we have now.
Yeah. Unity and what's the other one? That's Unity and the other one.
Yeah, the other one. That's what I can't think
of.
Unreal, yeah. So
Unreal, which is Epic, by the way. That's Epic.
Okay, so that is Epic. Thank you. I was doubting myself.
You were there.
So.
You had it.
What if Meta makes its own, Epic or Unity as well? With
this? It's not a bad time, by the way, given Unity's lack of love in the community right now.
That's true.
And everybody going, I'll just go to Unreal, and then meeting C++ in the dark and going, oh, wait.
Back away slowly.
Oh, I forgot. All right. Well, I mean, it's exciting times. There's no two ways about it. And again, weird to see Microsoft in the lead. Like, I'm not unhappy. Just it feels strange.
Not just in the lead, but just being really aggressive too, right?
Yeah. Well, where's Amazon in this? This is a workload for the cloud. Like Amazon should be all over this.
What a perfect segue.
So Amazon's had kind of an interesting year. That's been a big non-story. You're like, where is Amazon, right? This year, they've had announcements, over time, but it's been very vague. So this past week, they have their own custom chipsets. They announced some of that. I didn't really write that one up, but they announced an AI chatbot for the enterprise of their own called Q, which to me reminds me of Star Trek: The Next Generation, but I should have thought of James Bond as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Q.
And also just the word, question or query or whatever. So Amazon says all three of those things are an inspiration. But, this is very much like what Google is doing with Duet AI for Workspace customers and also for Google Cloud customers. What Microsoft is doing with Copilot for Microsoft 365. Two big differences, though. They're going to be language model agnostic. Right. So they had announced their Bedrock technology probably mid-year or something, whenever that was, earlier this year. And that you can just plug in different models. So that's interesting in theory. It's running on top of AWS, of course, which is great. They're going to integrate with Slack and Google right up front, but there'll be all kinds of connectors and it's going to be everywhere. It's also cheaper, right? So where Duet AI and Copilot for Microsoft 365 are both $30 per user per month on top of whatever else, the Amazon Q chatbot will be $20 per user per month. Enterprise only. It's not a consumer service.
You know how I read this, access to multiple language models thing is, well, we don't have any good language models. So let's support as many as we can.
There you go. Yes. Amazon's marketing will say open system. But that too. That's a different way to describe the same condition for sure.
This is, Microsoft made ODBC back in the day because they were like the seventh string database. And so let's make a standard.
Right.
That's the way you do this. And then I read this exactly this way. Hey, we haven't got any of the primary LLMs available to us, or at least we're not willing to pay for them. So we're going to let you choose.
So the thing, to me, the thing that's a little odd here, and with Amazon in general, is that from a developer's perspective with the AWS tie-in, I mean, the stuff they're doing on the back end makes tons of sense. There's going to be all kinds of AI workloads running on Amazon, whether or not any of this stuff takes off. But this is more of a direct play for enterprises, which they're not really a force in that market, right? There aren't a lot of end user or company-wide end user Amazon services out in the world. There's no Amazon Zoom that is a big deal. No Amazon Office Suite. No Amazon email system. No chat-based collaboration. Nothing. Like they don't really play in this space. And so it's kind of I think the tie-in with Slack and Gmail / Workspace is probably good positioning for them, because there is a large market of smaller companies that kind of pick and choose, pieces from everywhere. Like they'll use Workspace and Slack, obviously. So they could kind of plug it. They could be the Copilot for those guys or whatever. Like that's an interesting idea. I'm surprised Salesforce / Slack haven't thought of that. And of course, Google did think of it. That's what Duet is. But maybe, it's an interesting idea. I just don't think they have a good presence with this particular market.
They got to get a product. I mean, and this is one of the upsides I would say to Amazon in general, is that they kind of don't sell air. Like that's not their thing. Microsoft will often, is when you talk about Microsoft and Apple and even Google, these are the FUD factories, right? Like they do come out with ideas of things they might make that don't exist. You rarely ever see that from Amazon. Amazon's a product company.
Right.
And I mean, one of the reasons you're not seeing a whole lot about them in this space, don't have a product.
Yeah, right. That's true. I mean, Amazon, for consumers, every September releases approximately 1,000 new products, hardware products usually, and some software services as well. But it seems like a lucrative market for them. I mean, obviously AWS is gangbusters. I'm surprised they haven't done more in this space or tried to do more, but so far they've been kind of a non-event.
Yeah. I know some ex-Microsofties that are over there working on this stuff, and they won't talk to me about it. So I'm sure they've got some ideas. Well, it's like, I also take your silence as still trying to figure out what to do.
It's worth mentioning that Alexa was something that was come up by a Microsoft executive who was rebuffed at his company, went to Amazon and did it there. So, and I also, we've talked about this, but the notion of AI services, certain AI services being sort of a logical extension of that personal assistant world, it makes sense to me. I mean, there probably is an Alexa for business service out there. I got a little chill at my back.
I don't think there is. I mean, let's not forget that both Alexa and the Google Voice products both had their companies announce that, hey, these things never did what we want to. We've spent too much money on them. Like the cutbacks are coming. And I just got pinged by another friend who just got let go from the Alexa team. You know, and that was before ChatGPT burst onto the scene. So we were already in this interesting lull with voice products.
Yes.
The Cortana product never went anywhere. And both the Google and the Amazon product were like, this isn't working out for us. Well, so get ready.
I think that AI could inject some life into that.
Sure. But one would argue that's a complete retooling.
Yeah. Probably.
You know, and not the least of which being that all that computes in the cloud. You know, there's still a bunch that's done on the edge in these devices. And now you're going to have to redesign all of that. Like, you want to talk another opportunity for Microsoft to lead? It's like, get out the door with an appliance that could live in a home.
I mean, right. So I think, you know, Google Assistant has a natural deployment via Android, billions and billions of users. You know, Siri, as terrible as it is, goes out on billions of Apple devices. So it's a thing.
I told you about my misadventure with Google Home, right? When I was in the Netherlands, my buddy took a cue from what I did in my place and put Google all through it and controlled all the lights. So you'd walk. There literally is no light switches on the wall. You know, it uses motion sensors, but if that doesn't work, you can use the tablet in the room or you can use your voice. And so I would ask it to turn on the lights in the bedroom and my phone would overhear me and turn on every light in my vacant house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, one of the big, every time you give this thing a command or ask it a question, you get a lot of feedback. Like, is this the right device?
Yeah.
Which they all ask, you know.
Yeah, or they just turn on the wrong device. But you know, you're calling out the fact that it works in Android, and so it automatically works as a phone, and that's a feature. It's like it's got side effects too.
No, it's not. It's a feature for achieving mass usage. That's all. Like in other words, like for Amazon, because they don't have a phone and they don't have popular devices really. They need these Echo devices and whatever else to sell, right?
Right.
I'm sure they probably use the model where they sell a lot of them at a loss just to kind of get these things out in the world to get people hopefully addicted to them or whatever. But, Microsoft, I think Cortana failed because Windows Phone failed, and that was the natural.
Well, and this goal was to get you to buy stuff on Amazon via voice, and it largely didn't happen. Yeah. And Google didn't have a goal. Does Google ever have a goal? You know, like, I don't know what Google's goal was there. Right? They keep buying smart home stuff up and killing it, you know, but I don't know what their goal. Does anybody know what their goal is?
Google is like a cat. They get distracted really easily and then they forget what they were doing.
And every so often vomit stuff all over the floor.
Exactly. Right.
Just like a cat.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway,
it is interesting that they're focused on the enterprise, though. Ultimately, based on what you were just pointing out.
Yeah. Look, Amazon will make an AI play with consumers. They will. I mean, they have I don't want to call it infrastructure, but there is a world of these devices out there. I mean, they could. They've
already started.
Something.
I've got a preview on all of the Echoes that I have of the new system that is using transformer models as a response. And so it makes it a better conversation back and forth, which I don't want to do.
Right. It makes it a conversation, right? In other words, you're not asking discrete questions. It kind of it lends itself to more of a back and forth, which I also don't like. I'll just say, we talked about Amazon not being on the bad end of getting Nvidia GPUs. AI is expensive. And one of the ways you can kind of afford to pay for it is by charging people for it, right? You can't do that in the Echo space with Alexa, right? But you can do it with enterprise customers. So this might make more sense. It's less of a risk. Although, like I said, because it's Amazon, I'm not sure what kind of a name they have in that space. So,
do you think they're targeting their AWS customers, the folks that are already kind of
What does that mean? Like, what are AWS customers, right? Like, so some of them are individual developers or companies that are companies of developers, or they're, I don't know what it means to be an AWS customer, in the sense that there are probably hundreds of different types of AWS customers.
That's fair.
I mean, I really appreciate you bringing up this idea of what is the Amazon enterprise customer. Because we know what the Microsoft enterprise customer is.
You can look it up. They've tried various services. They have tried to do things. You don't hear about it a lot. I don't think anyone really uses it that much.
I mean, on the other hand, it's like, look, AWS is the largest cloud provider still to this day. And there are major enterprises that rely on AWS products, and they buy them like an enterprise. I hope that they're facilitating that in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And
there is a console that enterprises look to that understands their commit into the AWS space.
Right. The big advantage of Copilot on Microsoft 365 is that Microsoft has this thing called the Microsoft Graph. And so if you're in this world, that's the data. That's the data set that it's working against. And it makes sense. It's your email, your OneDrive / SharePoint files. It's all the people and all the information we have about everyone and everything in this organization. There's a natural virtuous cycle there. It makes sense. For Amazon, they don't have this, right? And so they're going to offer plugin support for different things. They're already working out of the gate with Slack and with Google. So you've got that part of it. It's sort of like a mini partial Microsoft Graph, if you will, for the non-Microsoft world. It makes sense. It's running on the biggest cloud infrastructure that there is. I mean, presumably, I was going to say there's going to be some kind of uptime guarantee that will be something like 19%, not 99.9999 something.
Dang.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what it is. But I mean, presumably, though, one of the reasons you might go with Amazon is because of its open nature, I guess, in this case, but also because it's on AWS and they own AWS. And I would hope as an enterprise customer, I would think that they would give me a little more preference than third parties, but we'll see.
I want a case study. I want to figure out who's using this thing.
I don't think anyone is.
Well,
I mean, that's the thing. I don't know. It's an unknown, but it's Amazon. You have to take it seriously. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Microsoft 365 browser extension that's going on.
Yeah. So the rest of this is sort of Microsoft 365 adjacent. I guess I could have made these two different sections. So Microsoft, I don't know. If you're out there and you use this browser extension, raise your hand. And no one does. So I think in Microsoft's transition to the cloud, this was one of the things they offered as a way to, as a sort of a front end, right? And so now we have office.com. We have the Microsoft 365 app that's on Windows and on mobile, which is that front end. You don't really need this thing anymore. In fact, one of the weird problems with the Microsoft 365 app and with the new Outlook is that they both have links to all of the Microsoft Office apps, but they seem to open the web versions of these apps, even if you have the local apps installed. So I think that's going to change over time. But the idea here is just that, we want to meet people where they are and so forth. And I think the office.com site just kind of handles this, and there's no need for like a separate extension. So it's not like anything's going away. It's just the extension, but all the capabilities are going to continue forward. So not a big deal, but just something to note. And then speaking of segues, see, nice.
Ooh, look at you.
Yeah, no, not really. That was just a mistake. But it's funny Michael will appreciate this because Mike is kind of an Apple guy. There's an interesting difference to me in the kind of managed, formal, long-lived kind of office productivity world on the Windows side. And then this kind of ad hoc, often markdown-based note-taking app world that exists, especially on the Mac, right? Yeah. It's a curious thing to me. But whatever, Evernote came up a long time ago, actually, after OneNote, but came up and was going gangbusters. And these days, you don't really hear a lot about Evernote. Things like Notion and Obsidian and whatever million other kind of markdown or markdown adjacent note-taking / I don't know what they call these things, workplace organizational tools, whatever. They're everywhere. I mean, there's lots of free versions, a lot of free apps rather, et cetera. So, Evernote, I think, has fallen on some hard times. There's sort of the Skype of this space, if you will.
Oh, that's a good
when the pandemic happened, they should have taken off, but something else did. In Skype's case, it was Zoom. And in Evernote's case, it was like Notion, right? Like they just kind of got left behind. So anyway, the latest news with Evernote is that their free plan is maybe a little too generous. And so they're going to cap this at, I think it's 50 notes was the number, in a bid to try to get people to pay for this service. But I feel like Evernote is just a missed opportunity.
They should have been acquired years ago. They actually got acquired last year, the beginning of this year.
Oh,
by,
you're right.
By Bending Spoons.
Yeah. That's right.
And then maybe that's part of the reason they're restructuring this now is this like, okay, let's try and get your house in order. It's been about a year, which is the normal sort of rule set, especially for European acquisitions, that they can kind of leave stuff alone for a while. But,
that's right. I had forgotten about that. We talked about this over the summer. There was some layoffs there and some talk about maybe them consolidating their headquarters back to Europe. And
yeah, I mean,
they've
got a niche. But the problem is that you've got OneNote, you've got Apple's free product. Now you've got Loop, and there's Notion. Like there's more modern tools than theirs.
Yep.
And they were just early to the market and never adapted. There was probably an acquisition offering early on that they didn't take. See Slack, and then they didn't get the follow-up option.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft, this kind of slow-moving aircraft carryover company, is certainly taking its time with Loop, but it is, in fact, making something called Loop, which is very interesting because they have all these legacy applications that everybody uses and loves, but they also understand that they can't really go forward with this stuff forever, and they need something more modern. And, I mean, granted, they took out the Xerox machine and photocopied Notion for the front-end UI, but the back end of it is actually Microsoft graph-based, again, and very powerful. And componentized, right? This is kind of the OLAD. No, not OLADB. Sorry, the what was this? The
ODBC.
Olay, the Olay of the internet, kind of a thing where
object linking and embedding.
Yeah. So yeah, Evernote. I don't know. Maybe it was just too small of a company to make that kind of a shift. I'm not really sure.
They did a lot of
revenue.
They did a lot of early. They upset their customer base 2 or 3 times before they even came to this point. And I think that really does, it grinds away at trust. And so then people just go, you know what? And maybe now it's time to jump ship. And you're right about also these other tools cropping up. And if you have this customer base, it's like, I want to stay here, but you keep doing me dirty. And now there's this cool shiny called Notion or, Loop or whatever it happens to be. So I just think they did not respect their customers.
Exactly how I ended up on OneNote, right? I was a Evernote user. The first round of we need to charge you came in. It's like, hey, don't I already own OneNote? Mm-hmm. And
I'm already paying for this.
And it was kind of a nuisance to make work on multiple devices. I had to set it up in SkyDrive. But you spend the afternoon banging your head against the keyboard and eventually it works. I'm like, ta-da, now I can put something in on my phone and it appears on my PC and like all is well, right? But at that point you're like, okay, bye Evernote. Like what you did was encourage me to look elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel bad about it. Evernote is one of many apps I looked at. I looked at it early. I mean, probably, 12, 15 years ago, whatever it was. And I used it for a while. And I was thinking maybe I could use this for writing. Maybe this is where I will do everything, And at that time, I had been using OneNote since it was in beta. And I went back to OneNote. And then I've been using Notion since, I don't know, last year, 2 years ago. I don't know, year and a half.
Well, I finally got Loop to actually appear in the Office apps, which was all this stupid policy configuration stuff. Because she who must be obeyed is starting to use Loop. And now that's where I started firing to you privately. Her angry tech support messages are coming to me. So I pass them along to you.
No, I appreciate that.
She wants to remodel a bathroom. So she takes a bunch of pictures of bathroom. Very reasonable thing to do with your phone, right? Now she wants to load them into Loop to organize them and so forth. Well, guess what?
I was going to say, how do they
haven't implemented share feature, the share capability at all. You have to go into Loop, say import a picture one at a time.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
So my guess on that, I'm not excusing that. That's ridiculous. But
No.
but when you like as an outsider, you would look at an app like this and you say, well, what are the basics? And that would be one of those things you would do pretty early on. I think from Microsoft's perspective, because of the architecture of the back end, they were more concerned about getting the componentization thing right and having it work with all those important Microsoft apps, Outlook and Teams and Word and Excel.
And to be clear, under the hood, all of this is SharePoint.
Yep. Please never say that again. That is the ugliest word in the English language.
That is the truth. Like when you ever wonder, like, why is this hard? Why is it taking so long? Right. It's SharePoint.
Listen, they're going to keep renaming it and calling it different stuff until we are all using it. That's
I don't know.
SharePoint
is a wrapper over SharePoint.
Yeah.
OneDrive is a wrapper over Share. It's all SharePoint all the way down.
All the way?
To its nougaty center. It's made of SharePoint.
I'm really excited for you to talk about this next one because earlier when I said thin client, it is because of this that I said thin client.
Oh, nice.
I had read about this and I wanted to hear. I was like, I'm actually going to be on Windows Weekly. I get to hear what they think about this because I know that's been a Microsoft thing.
As a Microsoft guy, I saw this thing announced, this thing being a WorkSpaces thin client that Amazon's coming out with that looks exactly like a Fire TV Cube, right? The living room set-top box, the cube-shaped little thing, because that's what it is. And my first thought is, okay, what are the Microsoft workloads here, right? I mean, I know it's going to run on it's going to connect up to AWS, I'm sure. I mean, of course, that makes sense. But Windows runs in AWS, right? Virtualized instances and so forth. It is really hard to find this information out. But from what I can tell, you basically have, I think it's 3 choices. You can get a full-blown Windows VM, essentially, right? Windows desktop. So for streaming that environment down to whatever your client is. It should work almost anywhere, right? It's going to work on their tablets. It's going to work on PCs, whatever. You can get an app streaming service. And this is the thing. When people talk to me or ask me about things like the Windows app that Microsoft just announced this year, which is a front end to a bunch of their kind of back end Windows virtualization / cloud-based streaming solutions, or Windows 365, right? Like, what's the end game here? What's the point of this? I actually don't think that streaming entire Windows desktops to a place is going to be the norm. It will be for some things, right? Microsoft has some back end developer stuff that does that, which is kind of a neat way to handle the occasional need, when you can work on a laptop most of the time, but when you need powerful GPUs and whatnot, you can hit a cloud-based instance of Windows. That's okay. But I think most people, they're using a Chromebook, they're using a Mac, they're using an iPad, they're using their phone, whatever it might be. And there's this one app that their business relies on. It runs on SharePoint probably, but it definitely runs on Windows. Mm-hmm. Probably does run on SharePoint.
It's usually worse behaved than that. Like we saw a ton of this during the pandemic crisis.
Yes.
Right. As you were shoving everybody working from home, you had an app from the 90s.
Yeah.
Dependent on SQL Server 2000.
Yep. Exactly.
And
it's running on
and it just wouldn't work over.
It was an on-prem server at one point. They put it in a VM in the cloud. They did that migration thing. It's just sitting there. It's running on one core. 3 people use it, but it's super important, and no one is ever going to update it. It's just what it is.
Yeah, you migrate off of it.
It's right, exactly. There's no right. It's life and death. There's nothing in between. So we used to call these things line of business apps in some ways, but I think that's the holy grail, if you will, of this kind of cloud-based delivery of whatever computing platform you choose to talk about. And then there's also a web interface of some kind where you can basically run web workloads, which I assume are not so much, well, they're probably web. I actually don't know. It's probably web apps and web, whatever they are, like web apps, basically. It doesn't seem too expensive. It's not coming out until, it's in the United States now, so it's not hitting the rest of the world until next year. But it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting in the way that the network has been the computer since the 1990s or whatever.
Yeah,
but
I mean, there's another side of the market of this, which I worked at times where you're using like low cost data entry in developing nations. Yeah. And you don't put the compute in the nation, you just put these endpoints there and you use a major VDI service. Typically Citrix or VMware Horizon, like those are the big players in the space. And the main thing is containment of data. Like they never get the data on their machines at all. They're just thin clients. Everything they're plugging in is going into a machine that's offshore.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, again, with Amazon's infrastructure, I mean, they're one of those companies. They're already doing this.
Yeah.
They can do this. It's
But there's a weird recurring Amazon enterprise conversation going on here.
Yeah, there is.
Right. Like that's what we're really talking about is another element of like that kind of Amazon owns a bunch of stuff that could be an enterprise offering. I just don't know that they know how to talk about it.
AI is the biggest thing in the world right now. And Amazon is one of those few companies that could do this. And why are we not at this nexus exactly? So I think they're trying to.
Why didn't they get 150,000 H100s?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Why did we get three units and not 150,000? I don't know.
Yeah. Are they missing it? I guess is the implication here. Like, are they missing the net? There's a generational shift happening in enterprise right now.
Yep.
Are you going to miss it?
So I would make the argument for Amazon that I have made for Microsoft as well, which is that if they don't succeed in directly interacting with customers, they're still going to succeed because so much of this will run on their infrastructure.
Yes. And this is always the bet. You already own AWS. So why wouldn't you use our VDI solution? Right.
Yes,
like
exactly.
that kind of, which is Microsoft's play every time, right? You're already in Office 365.
Okay. I'll tell you why, because when my ISP comes to me and says, "Hey, we sell home security stuff," and I'd be like, "Who are you? You're a pipe. I don't want other stuff from you. I want the internet, and that might be why, right?
I don't ask the water company for Coca-Cola.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Put a soda stream into the sink and we can talk.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty much what I got from Microsoft 365.
Okay. Before we get to antitrust, then let's take a quick break and then we'll come back with that. I think we're we're about an hour and 15 minutes out from the controlled burn.
We got this.
Let's take
We're in line.
Houston, we have a solution.
Before the flames start. We'll get there. We're good.
This is fine. All right, let me tell you about our next sponsor, which is Traceroute, who are bringing you this episode of Windows Weekly. With the rise of AI, technology is starting to seem more human, and that's causing some mixed feelings in the humans who actually use it. That's why you're going to love Season 3 of the Traceroute podcast. It's a podcast that explores the people who shape our digital world and how technology is changing society. The new season of Traceroute is already tackling questions like, why do we talk to AI but not to our toasters and our cars? And how long does it take to become besties with AI? I think that's what's really good about Traceroute is that it doesn't let you forget the humanity in all of this. It doesn't let you forget that there are people who are making these tools that we're using. We're not able to forget the humans behind all of it. In every episode of Traceroute, expert technologists peel back the layers of the stack to reveal that humanity in the hardware. Season 3 has explored our love-hate relationship with AI, and there's so much more to come, like the episode on the intersectional roles of tech evangelists, developer advocates, and tech influencers. Who really influences what technology gets made. You can get keyed into the conversation today. Listen and subscribe to the new season of Traceroute on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out Traceroute now. And thank you, Traceroute, for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. All righty, let us get back into it, this time talking about antitrust.
Yeah. This has become a weekly segment.
Has to be.
There's a lot of pending kind of big tech regulatory action, especially with Google, right? But this week we got two European regulators finally woke up and decided to opine on acquisitions that were announced last year. I don't know what's taken so long, but whatever. Adobe announced their acquisition of Figma. I want to say it was August. Let me check on that one. It was somewhere around that. September 2022. Sorry. $20 billion acquisition. They've been waiting on regulatory approval. 14 months have gone by. And now the CMA, which is in the UK, of course, said, I don't know. This is a provisional ruling. It's not the final ruling. They're looking for feedback. Presumably, Adobe's going to have a chance to kind of meet their needs, although that doesn't always go well for people, as we know all too well in the Microsoft space. And they'll issue a final ruling by the end of February. I don't know what to say to this. I mean, Figma was the biggest thing in the world, and then AI happened this year, and Adobe was like, whoop, forget Figma. And they just talked about AI all year. They've done some awesome AI stuff, but there is apparently evidence that Adobe was working on, so I should say Figma and Adobe XD are the products that compete with each other, right? These are basically user interface design tools for web, mobile, et cetera. And apparently Adobe was going to work on something a little closer to Figma, and then said, you know what, let's just buy them. It'll be cheaper, which doesn't make sense, or we'll buy them and get rid of them. I think this is a kind of a standard monopolist
both
play.
can be true, right?
That's right. Yeah. So we'll see. I honestly, I don't.
If it was anybody other than the UK CMA, I would take it seriously.
I know. That's
as soon as you say UK CMA, I just sort of get the giggles. Those guys? Really? Okay. Those guys?
I'm with you, but this next one is ridiculous. So this one makes the CMA look like they're making sense. Last August, it was, Amazon announced that they were going to acquire iRobot. And they make robotic
the Roomba
vacuum
guys.
cleaners. The little, they drive around on you. I was in Sweden maybe 7 years ago, and the house next to the house we were staying in had a Roomba for the lawn. And we would sit out on the porch and watch the thing bump into trees and drive around the yard. And I thought, this is the future, right? This is what the world's going to be like. And I've never seen one since. But this is a much smaller acquisition than the Figma acquisition, $1.7 billion. This past July, the European Commission kind of said, hey, I don't know if we want Amazon monopolizing the market for robot vacuum cleaners. And they do not. Yeah. So they're going to try to block this one. And who cares? Like, seriously, are you kidding me? Why is this a thing? Why is this even a concern? But
it's not a big enough market. I mean, admittedly, Roomba is the big player in it, right? The iRobot is the bigger player, but they're still less than half.
I almost feel like this is because of Amazon's other stuff. And so they're like, let's not give these guys who already created a bunch of small companies that compete with the other people.
But here's the thing. Here's my issue with this. I'm all about big tech regulation and all that kind of thing. But in the smart home space, we actually finally have established a standard for this stuff. We don't have to go to Best or Home Depot, wherever, look at a box and say, does it work with the thing I have anymore? Generally speaking, things should just work with everything going forward, right? So if you're on HomeKit with Apple or the Google stuff, or what else is there? Samsung has their own stupid smart things thing that nobody uses. As long as it's all kind of Matter connected, doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. Who cares who owns this? It's just even in the smart home market, this has to be a small. If you think about the things that you might want to do in a smart home, this would not be in the top 10.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The people who are putting in smart blinds and, smart lights everywhere and smart locks and all that kind of stuff, they're paying a human being to clean their house.
Right.
Like, those people are rich.
Right.
This is just not a thing. I'm not saying it's not a thing at all, but I mean, comparatively speaking, this is not a big deal. I don't think.
Well, you said the magic number, 1.7 billion, right? Like, come on, you've got bigger fish to fry. Paying attention to this.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, there are more important things.
And by the way, thanks for taking 15 months to get to this.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
That's why
it's crazy.
It feels very passive aggressive, I guess. It's look, we're mad at you for something else, so we're going to hold off.
It's like, I'm sorry. You were actually still looking at this?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Oh, wait, we've already done all of that. What's going on? Yeah.
It's just crazy. Anyway, I don't know. I just think it's funny. Not funny. It's stupid. It's stupid like the UK's concerns about Microsoft and cloud gaming are stupid. Like, it's like, and like Richard said, there are serious problems in the world you could be looking at and should be looking at. And this is what we're doing. And
a sub $2 billion robotic vacuum cleaner project is not one of them.
Yeah. Nope. No. Right. We get app stores out there with 30% fees and you're worried about an iRobot thing driving around like seriously. Oh, well. So anyway, it's out there. That's happening.
That being said, somebody dropped a link for the Yarbo in the chat there, and now I want one. Combination snowblower, lawnmower, and leaf blower. Are you kidding? With tractor blades?
Right. I'm pretty sure that, what was that guy's name? The guy who played Magnum P.I., Tom Selleck, was in a sci-fi movie in the 80s about this exact robot.
That is a recipe for you being chased through your yard by a terrifying robot.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I love
Does that thing have blades? What's happening here?
Yeah, no. You know, there's no grace. There's no kind or gentler way to snowblow, right? Like it's violence. So
this is true. Oh dear! I just watched
you could get a heated driveway, which, by the way, these same people are going to have. They don't need it. You know,
that's true. Yeah, the people who can afford this.
The people who are like fully automating their houses, they have money.
Yeah,
you know, they're not looking for this disc. What are you buying? It's a thing to put a cat. Like your cat will sit on.
Yeah,
that's all it is. It's a cat toy.
Now, I have a buddy who's not that well-to-do, but has 2 dogs, and like the Roomba is out every day just to manage dog hair.
Yeah, it is good for dogs.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
that's why I have one actually.
But does the Roomba get up on the couch or the beds? Because that's where the real problems are.
Listen, none of your business. Just kidding.
Where my dogs go.
Do they ever get off the couch or the bed? I think is what you're really asking.
I have little ramps all over my house.
By the way, my cats are getting old. We're talking about putting steps in next to couches and stuff because they're having a hard time.
That's where you are. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I have steps for my one dog. He's
what I need is a catapult that will just
sling the cat where he needs to bring it up onto.
Yeah. Oh Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Oh dear.
Cat's on the couch.
Oh boy. Let's move into Xbox Corner.
Yeah. So unfortunately, this first story is no longer valid. It was when I wrote the notes originally, but so Black Friday obviously was Friday. Cyber Monday was Monday. And then this week is sort of Cyber Week and everything's always on sale. But actually the 2 good Xbox deals, there were more than 2, but the 2 big console ones, which were Xbox Series X for $400, I think was the deal, and Xbox Series S was under $300. Those are gone. You can still get the Xbox Series X at Amazon for $449, which is better than $500, but not its best ever price. But there was a great sale on Xbox Series X and S storage, like third-party storage, Seagate, I think WD. Mm-hmm. I actually almost pulled the trigger on that, and then I was like, "Oh, right, I never used my Xbox. Why am I spending this money?" But I thought about it because it was such a good deal. But I'm like, it's such a good deal. Anyway, that deal's over too. So, sorry about that.
Aren't they due for a new Xbox? I mean, the X is how old?
Yeah, they're both. This is 2020.
Yeah,
so 3 years old. Yeah. Sony just revved did a cost reduce. They call it slim. It's like, it's slightly slimmer, I guess. I think the big deal with the new PS5 is that the optical drive is optional. I think that's the way they should have done it from the beginning. I think that's smart.
Dun. Like, geez. Yeah. Optical drive?
A lot of people don't need it, right?
Who's got spinning media anymore?
I don't know. Not me.
Unless they're multi-terabyte drives.
I don't have an optical drive in this house, anything in a computer.
It's not whether you have a drive. It's like, do you have anything you could put in it?
You know what I have? I have a DVD of my son and probably one of my daughter when they were in grade school, and they it's like when you buy a new car and the first thing they do is sell you all the extra protection. Yeah. Or when you get a new computer and they try to upsell you on virus protection. It's like when my kids go to school and the first thing they do is take photos and fingerprint them and like, just in case they get kidnapped, here's a DVD you can give to the police. Like, guys, come on. It's like the first day of school. Can we pretend everything's okay? Like, so I have those because you don't throw that away.
No.
Right? That must be a creepy little basement.
You got to move them over to USB keys, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they're on disk. I don't know what to do with them. So anyway,
there are services.
But you asked, aren't they due? Yeah, they are due. And I think as soon as next year, we're going to see at least one of those consoles revved, if not both. But these will be cost reduced, not bumps, right?
Yeah. But that's one of the ways you cost reduce is a more efficient piece of hardware. It consumes less power.
Yeah. Right.
But it has more
you reduce the chips and all that.
I mean, 4 years, that's a lot of tick-tocking, right? Like for the chipsets.
Console life cycles are getting longer and longer.
But they're back to PC spec machines, basically, right? Like they're no longer exotic hardware. So it shouldn't be that difficult to pick a line.
I like what they did with the Xbox One. The first one was a tank. The Xbox Series S was one of the most beautiful consoles I think ever made. The Series S is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And they did the X, which
just
was
just a
nice
great
bump. I thought that was a good little strategy, and I'm sure they're going to do something similar this time. But
I mean, what I like about the Cube is at least fits places, right? Because the PS5 fits nowhere.
Right. You know, and it's shaped like some kind of a tulip or something. So
like you need to put it on a plinth. Yeah. Right? It's not going to go anywhere else.
Oh my God.
With lighting.
Yeah, with backlighting, of course. That's funny. Yeah, I think we're going to see that next year. But yeah, Xbox, I don't know if anyone's paying attention to this, but Xbox has been a little distracted this past year, and part of aside from all the obvious stuff with Activision, Blizzard, and all that,
the leaks.
You know, they had component issues for a long time. They're doing horribly compared to the PS5. I think they're just trying to ride this one out a little bit, but yeah, I think next year will be the time.
Or they start spinning all the gaming stuff off and winding down, right? Like one or the other. Like there's a strategy here. Isn't there a strategy here?
I don't think it's that.
Winding down.
By Activision. Not yet. Too soon.
Xbox? Come on.
Well, Xbox will exist as a fever dream of services and software.
There you go. That's true.
Yeah.
Xbox Cloud. Antitrust. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. The EU spirit
the
came
November update for Xbox arrived today. This is for both Xbox consoles and also the Xbox app on the PC. Speaking of which, I need to install that and look at this. This one is kind of interesting because they're actually, I'll just combine the next two stories. So there was a report that Microsoft was deprecating the Microsoft Rewards app on Xbox. Microsoft Rewards is not going away. It's actually being integrated into the system software. So we see that in the November update. This is the last major update for Xbox for the year. They don't do one in December. And so the next one won't be until, I think it's actually February, until we're going to see another one. And on the PC, this sounds like a small thing, but if you've ever used the Xbox app, you'll appreciate this. They're going to have a compact mode. And I don't mean compact like makeup. I mean like a little, like a small, like a mini player kind of thing, which is so necessary. This app has become really big and bloated, and anyway, it's overdue, so that's good. Lots of changes under the hood on both performance, blah blah blah, whatever. There is an Xbox wireless controller firmware update rolling out as part of the update as well, so you can have that, get that separately. I should say it's not in the app. You have to go to the Xbox accessories app if you're on Windows. And that should be deprecated soon because that's like a Windows 8 app. But there it is, kind of still kicking around for some reason. So there's that. This just happened while we were recording the show, or at least on my side it did. Netflix inexplicably has a gaming service, and even more inexplicably, they surface it inside of their video streaming app, which drives me insane because I can't turn it off, and I do not want to see that. But they are bringing a trilogy of Grand Theft Auto games to the service, which
I saw that. It's such a weird, they're so weird. They are so weird. I don't understand. Yeah. There's a strategy I don't understand.
Well, because their games to me, the thing they remind me the most of is either like what Amazon does on their Kindle Fire or HD, whatever they're called, the tablet things, or what Apple does, right? With Apple Arcade, they're kind of usually cutesy games and stuff. And it's like we're Nintendo. Also, we're going to have Grand Theft Auto for some reason. It's like, really? So they're being updated
played
for mobile.
Game? Like
on mobile.
Yeah, but this is also the original game where you hired a hooker and then killed her to save money, right? Like,
well, allegedly, Richard, you didn't have to do that. That's a feature of the game. I mean, it's an optional thing.
I'm just wondering at the choice. Like, bullied a rock star for finding more ways to sell games that are a decade plus old. But I'm just, what is Reed Hastings thinking? Like,
you're talking to someone who spent an afternoon trying to fly a plane under the Eiffel Tower in Flight Simulator. So I don't know. Like I guess we can all go on our own little side quests. I don't know, but look, mobile is, what was the figure? 50% of gaming by revenue. I mean, I understand why they want to be part of this market. I feel like they have a strong enough brand. They could just have a separate app for it, for crying out loud. Netflix games, seriously. You get it for free with your subscription. You could advertise the app in Netflix. I don't like that it's in Netflix, but I don't know. Pretty soon we're going to be watching people play games in Netflix like we do on Twitch or YouTube or whatever, right? I mean, that's got to be a thing if it isn't already. I mean, because that's why people are there, right? To watch stuff, I guess.
Are these streamed games? Like, what's the compute resource?
I refuse to look at this service, Richard. I don't know the answer to that question. I assume they are downloaded, actually, but I don't know that. I think they're downloading.
So then they're just PC games. Or
they're mobile games, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are mobile games. So, and actually, that's what's kind of interesting about this. I don't know that. I don't believe these games were. I could be wrong. I'm not. I don't believe these games were ever on mobile before. Maybe that's kind of the big deal. Mobile devices are powerful enough. I mean, they're older games in a way, right? GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas. But no, I guess they did. I'm sorry, they were on mobile. Excuse me. I'm sorry, they have been released on mobile. So, but they're older games, and they came to mobile a couple of years ago. Now they're coming through Amazon. Amazon, their video streaming service back when their primary business was delivering DVDs. Was like this place where
Amazon.
videos went to die.
You meant Amazon.
I said Amazon. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Netflix. Sorry. When they were their original business, right, was the DVD thing.
DVDs.
Their original video collection was horrible. It was like if you go to Amazon today, you'll see a lot of crap. But Netflix at that time was worse than that. It was only that that like B and C level movies and stuff like that. Obviously today it's a different animal. Although now there's so much stuff you can't find anything. This feels like that, but for games. It's like, remember these were popular? Let's do this now. And it's like, really?
No, I mean, their problem now is Disney, right?
Yeah.
Like you've clearly proven to the world that online movie watching is the way to go. So now the folks that own the studios are taking the space. And so you're diversifying. You tried to make your own product, found out it was hard. And now you're looking for other markets. Like Netflix has got everything to lose here. You were the market leader, and now the big boys came to play, and you've got problems. So you diversify.
Yeah,
I'm still reminded of the old Demolition Man line. The whole, every restaurant is Taco Bell after the restaurant wars. It's like soon every streaming service will be Disney.
Yeah, there's something to that.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, the Disneyfication, the Disneyification of all media,
Yeah.
No, that's not what we need. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what to say about Netflix. All I know is I will never, ever launch one of these games, ever.
Not through that mechanism anyway.
Yep.
But Steam.
That's a different thing. That's different. It's different.
I'm pretty sure.
And then a quick update on my lack of Call of Duty playing this year. I think I last put down the console on March 2 or 3. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. I did buy the latest Call of Duty game. I did install it. I then installed it again and installed it a third time because what the is going on with Call of Duty? Like there's like these hundreds of gigabyte updates. Like what's the point of pre-installing something when on day one you have to install 200 gigabytes of updates? Like you might as well just wait. You're going to install it again anyway. Mm-hmm. And so before I went to Seattle, I think, I installed I did what I thought was going to be the final install. I didn't play the single player campaign. And then I got back from Seattle and I turned it on and I looked at one of the levels. It looks great. And then I never played it again. So I don't know if I'm going to play. I think I might be done. I did pay $70 on it. So I feel like I got my value there, but apparently this game is not doing well in a review sense. It's one of the most poorly reviewed Call of Duty games. I will say from a multiplayer perspective, it's probably pretty damn good because these are the classic Modern Warfare 2 levels remastered, remade or whatever. And that was like a high point for the series.
To clarify, did you say you turned it on, you looked at the level, and that was worth your $70? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I was being sarcastic.
Okay.
I
must have been really pretty.
I spent less. I spent probably a total of 2 hours installing the game and 2 minutes playing it.
Okay,
so I don't know how that works out on a.
It's hard, Paul, because you talk in sarcasm a lot, ratio. And so to know when you're not is a little difficult.
You got to understand, I had a serious Call of Duty addiction, I played Call of Duty pretty much straight through from the time that Call of Duty came out. Call of Duty 2 came out in 2005 on the Xbox 360 as a launch title until March.
Wow,
like pretty much all I did.
And he had to cold turkey it. Like he literally put it down, and hasn't picked it back up, and he knows what happens if he does.
Well, except that I picked it up and I was like, I think I'm done. And we'll see. I don't want to make any promises. I like what they did with the multiplayer. I am still kind of curious about it. But you know what? Halo, we talked about this last week. Not Halo. Half-Life came out in a 25th anniversary edition. I think it was last week we talked. And that solves the problem nicely because that's a great game. And I don't feel like I have any violent tendencies toward other human beings when I play that game. So, I think I'll just stick with that for a little while. It's fun.
Was that sarcasm or was that truth?
No, that's real. Okay. When I play Call of Duty, I only play multiplayer. I play a very specific kind of hardcore version of Team Deathmatch, and I want to reach through the screen and strangle people. I can't stand the human beings that play this game. They're terrible. And I'm one of them. That's the problem. So I think I'm trying to move past this.
So you still play games, just you have not played Call of Duty.
A lot less frequently. And this is not I know this in the video game world, this is almost like a political / religious statement. I don't mean it that way at all. Primarily on the PC this year. And I don't take that to mean I am now switching to become a PC gamer like Richard, but that's what I've been doing. And
welcome to the master race.
Oh dear.
So
boo.
I know. I don't want to, it's not coincidental. It is what it is. I mean, if I could play, I could and have played games like on an iPad. I played those, what are they called? The Walking Dead games, those kind of interactive. Those are fun. I played through a couple of those on the iPad at one point. And I've played games through on mobile. I played a Wanted, Dead or Alive, one of those driving games I actually completed on a phone, at one point. But I can do other things, is my point. But I'm trying to get out of the
there's an addict. There's an addict phrase here that's just like I could quit. If I wanted
I could quit anytime I want.
Anytime I wanted to.
Yeah. Well, I did. It was in March. So I don't know. It's it's like you go off a diet and you're like, that just made me feel sick. So it's okay. Anyway, speaking of Call of Duty, so awash as it is in bad reviews. There are rumors now about the next game, and I could be wrong, but I don't think we've ever had rumors this early about Call of Duty, and it kind of makes me wonder if this isn't a little bit of damage control on Activision's part, because one of the big questions is they only have had, the World War II games were popular in their day, but the times they've gone back to that, Call of Duty 5 was one, and then Call of Duty World at War was one. They were, like it's okay. Like we've kind of moved on. The problem is once you've played Modern Warfare, going back to, a little bit, stupid guns is not that fun. So to date, they've tried different things. They've tried 3 different times to have different franchises start up, and they all failed. But the 2 that have succeeded are Modern Warfare and Black Ops. So Modern Warfare, they rebooted 3, 4, 5 years ago, whatever it was. So we've had now we've completed the trilogy. We've had the 3 Modern Warfare games, they aren't really remakes, but new Modern Warfare games. So we've had 6 of those totally. And we've had 5, I think it was 5 Call of Duty Black Ops games. I believe the most recent one was Cold War, which was okay. It was based on the remade Modern Warfare 1, blah, 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 whatever. But apparently they're going right back to Black Ops for the next one. So Black Ops 6 will take place in the Gulf in the early 90s. Gulf, I mean like the Middle East, Iraq, that area. And we'll see. So I don't know. I don't think that's going to excite me enough to go back. So whatever. But interesting that they're going to the well again, I guess. They need to figure something out a little more long-term than doing the same game over and over again. But
it's worked so far. This is $1 billion franchise, right? Like every time.
Yeah, I know. But you know what we haven't heard is how quickly they made $1 billion this time. I don't think they have.
I think you're going to have to wait for quarterlies on that one. But now it's a Microsoft company, so how well they're going to bury it. There's no way you're going to know. They don't need to tell.
I mean, we'll see. But I don't. I've always just this game was originally not going to be a full title. It was going to be a DLC for the last game, and I've only spent 2 minutes in it.
$70 for it.
I did spend 70. I spend money wisely. I will have a course on how to spend money. I don't understand why we're even criticizing this.
I'm not.
I don't know what.
I'm not criticizing, only inquiring. That's it.
Oh boy.
All righty. We wash away the Call of Duty badness. And up next, we've got our tips and picks of the week, or as Leo calls them, the back of the book. All righty, folks, it's time for the tips and picks of the week. And it starts out with the tip of the week.
It starts out poorly because this has also run out. So when I put this in, it was still available, but now Microsoft's annual ugly Christmas sweater, which this year has a Windows XP Bliss theme, has in fact just sold out. So
I have seen one of these in person at Ignite.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic.
This one, I will say, of the ugly sweaters Microsoft has done over the past several years, is the least ugly. Honestly, it's almost not ugly enough.
It's great, actually. I think I like it. Yeah.
Interesting. It's my least favorite one they've done.
Oh, it's okay. So, but you might. I mean, you're probably enjoying them on a kind of a kitschy level.
Well, right? I bought one. I'm going to a
party where we're having a contest, so you can have the ugliest sweater,
right?
And I'm going to win.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. You're right, Paul. This one feels more fashionable, and so because of that,
it's fine. I mean, honestly, it's not bad.
It's not as ugly. I like that sort of the going over the top, but.
I apologize for my lack of a tip. So there's that.
Look, news moves quick. That's all.
Yeah, it's tough to do this during the sale week, right?
Yeah. Well, this one didn't sell out immediately. And I think in part because it wasn't so dramatic. And I thought, well, here we go. Maybe this will. No.
They're pretty pricey. I thought about getting it again and starting to become a collector.
Yeah, they are
but
expensive.
They're pretty pricey.
Right. So, just as a bit of background on this next thing, as part of what I do for a living, but also just part of the way that I am, I test things constantly, right? And I mean apps and services, I mean workflows, one of the magical things that can happen for someone like me anyway, who has ADHD or whatever, is you actually find something that works better than the thing you were doing before. It doesn't happen all that much. I think last year I did write up a little thing. I think there were 3 apps last year that were kind of changed things for me, one of which was Notion, actually. So it happens, right? So as part of this, and this is something I'd been doing this year on and off because Microsoft was making so many waves with Bing at the time, what we called Bing Chat, which is now the Copilot in Bing. Bing is something I've gone back to again and again, and every time I use it, it takes about 10 seconds, and I'm like, nope, I don't like the way this looks. I don't like the results. It's not the same. I always go running back to Google. So I thought it was a couple of weeks ago. I was like, I'm going to try DuckDuckGo. Mm-hmm. And then when that fails, because it will, I'm going to try Brave Search. And then when that fails, because it will, I will move again onto Bing. And when that fails, I'll just go back to Google Search. And at least I tried, right? And I try to do this every, so often, whatever. And the thing is, I use my browser as Brave. And of course, I sync all my settings across all my devices. And so if I change the search engine in Brave, it changes it everywhere. I don't have to go and make that change everywhere, which is kind of neat. So I experienced something I could say I've never experienced with the alternate search engine, which is I started using it, and then like 2 weeks went by, and I was like, wait a minute. Like I literally at one point searched and saw the logo, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm still using this? Like I actually had to go back and think about it. And look, I know a lot of this is kind of anecdotal. I can't stand when someone says to me, "Oh yeah, sure, well, I've been using it for 4 years. No big deal." Yeah, but you haven't been testing Google every day against it, right? Like, it's okay if you go and use something and it works for you. That's fine,
right? But
you can't come back to me and say, "Well, I know it's better than Google because I use it." It's like, yeah, that's not how it works, So it's actually kind of amazing to me to fall into this kind of trap, if you will. Like this has never happened with a search engine ever. Like invariably, like the first or second search will be like, nope. And I go running back. And so I don't know what to attribute it to. In fact, I looked into it. I was like, I followed DuckDuckGo. I mean, they have other products. They have a browser that's still in a very early state. They have browser extensions. They have other products. But I was like, was there something going on here I wasn't aware of? Did they make some advance this year that I didn't know about? And not really. I mean, nothing stands out. So I don't know what happened, but I've tried this in the past and found it lacking. And I tried it 2 weeks ago and never stopped using it. So We'll see what this looks like in 2 weeks and then in 2 months or whatever. But similar to like when I switched to Brave, whenever that was a couple of years ago, same thing. I never went back, and highly recommend that. And I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it sounds like you're still kind of coming to terms with it.
I'm confused by it. Someone said something, talked about like confirmation bias, and I was like, no, this is the opposite of confirmation bias. I was positive this wasn't going to work. I went into this expecting it to fail, because that's what always happens. I try this stuff all the time. Every time a new version of a browser comes out, which these days is like every 10 seconds, or these search engines get improved. Now they're adding AI things to everything or whatever it is. I always go and I look at these things and you're like, whatever, I don't care. And somehow this one stuck. And I'm just throwing it out there because I know there's a kind of a big anti-Google sentiment out there, which I totally understand. We're in a tough spot with Google because we rely on them for so much. But I think we all understand that this company can't be trusted on one level because they're selling your personal information and your online activities to advertisers. And some people are cool with that. I'm not. So and this, I should say, like Brave Search, same thing, completely private. They don't use your information for anything. It's just a private search engine. So that shouldn't work well, frankly, but it has for me. So your mileage may vary, but
worth taking a look.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All righty, let's talk about Run as Radio for this week.
Published this week. In fact, today, my conversation with Nicholas Blank, which from a few weeks ago, where we talked about zero trust guidance. So, zero trust comes up a lot. We're all using it. If you're using any cloud products, they work on a zero trust model. It's just a strategy around authenticating. But what I appreciated with Nicholas's conversation is really got into this broader conversation about security for your organization and recognizing that you can utilize zero trust practices more heavily in certain areas, additional levels of authentication, tighter rules for what can access where. We got into some of the Azure features that are around that with conditional access. But in the end, it was pointing to there is a guidebook now that they've really prepared this framework to walk you through all the conversations you need to have, often with business leaders around the security infrastructure, that it's not simple. You can't apply the same practices everywhere. You've got to kind of zero in on where you want to make things more challenging and where it's okay to be a bit more relaxed. So I'm always appreciative when we get away from a product conversation into sort of a people and practices conversation, and that's where we went with this.
Nice. And what's next but our brown liquor pick of the week?
Oh, I got to catch you up a little, Micah. You've been off doing your normal job, not hanging around with us. But a few weeks back, Paul and I were together. We had this dinner on a Monday that led to a couple of very unusual bourbons that I ended up putting on the show.
Ooh,
and the problem with them is they were both the kind of bourbons where it's like, you're probably not going to be able to buy this. Yeah. And so I said, I promise you, I'm going to go get a much more conventional booze. And so I went shopping. I have the bottle. And then this was a find for me, going to one of the local liquor store in the city, the kind of fancy one where I can usually get more unusual things. This is the Pendleton Rye, the 12-year-old. And it was a surprise. Now, it's a super conventional whiskey from the point of view of it's exactly 40%. It's about a $50 bottle, which I would put in the bottom of the premium range. It's not a bar whiskey. It's you want to drink this, but I wouldn't be upset about putting it in a cocktail. What it's unusual is it's 100% rye. And we'll talk about why that's unusual. And it's also a 12-year-old, which is weird because normally what we like, rye is usually what we call the middle grain or the flavor grain in a bourbon. If you're making American bourbon, it's got to be at least 51% corn because that's the biz. You always include a little bit of barley, 5, 10, or 15%, because that provides the amylase that helps make more ethanol, less methanol, so nobody goes blind, or more relevantly, you don't have to throw away a certain amount of your product. And then in between is this flavor grain. And in both the whiskeys we had in the previous weeks, both the Willet and the Mark, though that middle grain was wheat. But most American bourbons, the majority of them, that middle grain is rye because it's got a kind of spice to it. It's got a hit to it. It's a quirky flavor. And so you would think that 100% rye, a pure rye whiskey, would be very spicy, would be quite
like
sharp.
A Scotch almost, like a really harsh,
Except that it isn't, because it's been in a barrel for 12 years. And a lot of that character diminishes over 12 years. So that's weird. The other point is, in general, like, why is this, why does this exist? Like, what is this about? Why is it called Pendleton? And Pendleton is actually a town in the northeastern corner of Oregon where they have a rodeo, the Pendleton Roundup. It's been going since 1910. And you'll notice that on the bottle, it says 1910. And by the way, they are still selling tickets. It's like the 123rd year of this. It's in September. You can start buying tickets in early January. They run you can do the 1910 room, with the sort of founders room, for $300 a day. Pricey. And so Pendleton's out of Oregon, and you'll notice that if you look at the bottle, it says Canadian whiskey on it, but bottled by the Hood River Distillers out of Oregon. So this is a split relationship, that the 100% rye thing is your cue. Because it's 100% rye, normally it would produce a lot of methanol when it's fermented. You don't sprout or malt rye the way you do with barley. You don't have that initial sugar conversion. You just grind the grain to flour. And if you attempt to ferment off of that, you're going to produce a lot of methanol. But there is a company out of Alberta, specific at Calgary, called Alberta Distillers. And by the way, Calgary also has a very old rodeo. The Stampede started in 1912. So there's a rodeo thing going on between these two locations. But Alberta Distillers has been going since the 1940s. And they are famous for making Canadian whiskey out of rye. And the way they do it is they literally created their own enzyme.
What?
So instead of using amylase, which you'd normally get from barley, they have a microbiologist. And their microbiologist has a custom enzyme that they use to properly digest the rye grain so that they produce ethanol instead of methanol. And this has been the problem with rye. Like, most of the time when you see a rye from an American bourbon, if it's still bourbon, of course, there's still a lot of corn in it. But if it's a pure rye, it'll usually have 5 or 10% barley in it to get that amylase to do the digestion properly. But this is 100% rye. And it's because they have their own digestion mechanism on it to solve that particular problem. And by far the most famous whiskey, or the most common whiskey that Alberta Distillers makes, is a whiskey called Alberta Premium, which is much more of a bar whiskey. It's a $20 bottle. It's 100% rye. It's about considered the number one best-selling rye whiskey in the world. It's fairly inexpensively priced. And Alberta Distillers, by the way, ended up in the same storm in the 1980s with American brands, and over to then they had to get spun off, and now it's owned by Suntory. The same things that happened to Maker's Mark. And the Hood River, so the whiskey's actually made in Calgary. Used to be on the outskirts of Calgary, but that was the 1940s. Now it's kind of in the middle of town, still there. They actually have huge warehouses that are heated, because Calgary gets very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. And that's not actually good for making whiskey. So they have these great big managed barrel houses. And then those barrels are shipped to the Hood Rivers Distiller, which is on the Columbia River. Right just east of Portland. It's closer in than Pendleton is, which is much further down the river. Mount Hood's only about 30 miles away, and Mount Hood is a dormant stratovolcano. If it ever did go off, like, the Hood River Distillers would not exist anymore. They make a point about the fact that they use water from the Hood watershed to cut this down to the 40%. So it's their sort of Oregonian claim to fame. Hood Rivers Distillers is the original, very first distillation license, legal one, in Oregon back in the 1930s, post-Prohibition. Their original business was brandy. That part of the world grows a lot of fruit, and so the excess fruit was then being distilled into brandies. They still make those brandies today under the Clear Creek brand, but they do the bottling. And one of the things I got to say about this bottle is it is gorgeous. It has embossed inlays on the whole bottle. Like, it's for a $50 bottle of whiskey. This is a lovely bottle. I'm really shocked at how nice it is. But yeah, 100% rye. ground to flour by a hammer mill, added with hot water and this custom enzyme to do the fermentation. And then it's distilled like you distill bourbon. So it's run up in a column still to around 60%, then finished in a pot still around 67, 68, and then barreled for 12 years. And that's in American oak. So it's just like bourbon is in toasted American oak, when then it's shipped down to Oregon, where it is bottled into this nice bottle. This is one of the most drinkable ryes you'll encounter. It is a lightweight, smooth drinking, not a big punch in the face. You're not going to be looking for water for it. It's already at 40%. You don't need even really an ice cube unless you want a cold drink. But I wouldn't hesitate to throw this into an old fashioned or in a Manhattan. You'd be happy with the results. And it is, like I said, one of the very rare true 100% ryes that exists today.
Wow. I love that they made their own enzyme. That's the coolest part for me.
It's crazy, right? And it's sort of Alberta distillers' claim to fame, that they are the ones who can make 100% rye because they get good yields from it. Where anybody else who does that, it just costs them money. It's not worthwhile. Or so they always add, and the simple solution is just to add a little malt to it. If you add 10% barley, you're fine. Does anybody really care about the mash bill? Does it make a difference that it's 100%? The question you're about to ask is, does it taste good? Right. And you know what? This tastes good. It happens to be 100% rye. But I wanted to bring something a little more approachable after the crazy whiskeys we've had the past couple of weeks. And I felt like a Canadian would be fun. And then I found it was bottled in Oregon. So I'm like, well, what's going on? And it's like, oh, it's a rodeo thing. They made this whiskey. They actually made 4 different variations of this whiskey, what they call the Pendletons, in 2003 in relation to the rodeo. And I think by far this is the best of the 4.
Cool. All righty, folks. Well, that is going to bring us to the end of this episode of Windows Weekly. You can tune in if you are actually on YouTube, or if you're a Club Twit member, every Wednesday around about 11 a.m. Pacific. If you head to twit.tv/live, you'll see a link to go watch it on YouTube. If you are a member of Club Twit, which I'll talk about in just a moment, then it will be there for you as well. Of course, it is always helpful and wonderful if you go and subscribe to the show, which you can do by going to twit.tv/WW. When you head to that link, you will see the option to subscribe to either audio or video formats. And you click on one of those buttons and you will see many different providers that you can choose from. So Pocket Casts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you happen to be listening to your podcasts. We try to be in all of those places and available for you to subscribe or follow the show from there. Again, that's at twit.tv/WW. I also want to mention Club Twit, which you can find by going to twit.tv/clubtwit. When you head there, you will be able to join the club for $7 a month, $84 a year. When you join the club, you get access to some great stuff. First and foremost is a complete ad-free experience. Yes, all of our shows completely ad-free because you are the supporter of the show. You also gain access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else. Behind the scenes, before the show, after the show, special Club Twit events get published there. And so new people joining all the time, they get access to this huge back catalog of great stuff in our Twit Plus bonus feed. You also gain access to the Club Twit Discord. It's a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and also those of us here at Twit. And it lets you see more of our live stream. So you can kind of watch as the show is getting set up. After the show is over, a little bit of time, which you won't get if you are not a subscriber. And then you also get to hang out with some great folks where there are lots of fun images being posted all the time, conversation, chatter during the show, that kind of thing. All of that you can find at twit.tv/clubtwit. And the fun doesn't stop there. By joining the club, you get access to some special exclusive shows. There's the Untitled Linux show for those of you who love Linux. You can check out that show, which has some great conversations about Linux. There's also Hands on Windows from Paul Thurrott, which is a show that covers Windows tips and tricks. There's Hands on Mac from me, Micah Sargent, that covers Apple tips and tricks. And there is Home Theater Geeks, a great show from Scott Wilkinson that has everything you need to know about the home theater. There are interviews, reviews, questions answered, all sorts of great stuff. And Jason Howell's own AI Inside, which is a show that is all about artificial intelligence. Those shows are Club Twit exclusives, so you got to join the club if you want to check them out. Now is the time where I say thank you to our wonderful guests. Richard Campbell, thank you so much for your time today. Anything you want to plug before we say goodbye?
Next week is Dev Intersection, so if you haven't already got your ticket, boy, that flight's going to be expensive. We're going to be in Orlando at the Swan Hotel. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be a great group of folks. We're going to have some fun there. And other than that, the podcast is the podcast.
Awesome. And Paul Thurrott of Thurrott.com. What about you?
I don't know. I've been updating the book a lot. So if you haven't downloaded that recently, this week, I'm going to update it again before the end of the week. There's a bunch of stuff happening there.
Sounds like a Call of Duty sort of way of doing things.
It is my calling, I guess.
There you go. It's there it is. It's your call. So yes, check that out. What's the website?
Leanpub.
Yes, that's right. Leanpub.com.
Windows 11 field guide, all one word, will get you right to the book.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Paul Thurrott, Richard Campbell, thank you so much for having me join you today. I appreciate hanging
Thanks,
out.
Micah.
Always a great time. And those of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Leo will be back next week. But until then, go about your merry way. I don't have anything else to say, but it rhymed. Bye, everybody.
Nice.
Come join us on This Week in Enterprise Tech. Expert co-host and I talk about the enterprise world, and we're joined by industry professionals and trailblazers like CEOs, CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, every acronym role, plus IT pros and marketeers. When we talk about technology, software plus services, security, you name it, everything under the sun. You know what? I learn something each and every week, and I bet you will too. So definitely join us. And of course, check out the twit.tv website and click on This Week in Enterprise Tech. Subscribe today.